Hey everyone, we're continuing our Helping Parents Win during COVID-19 series today and have another great interview for you. Our guest today is Scott Brawner. Scott has worked in international missions sending and security for more than 20 years, including 7 years as the Director of Risk Management for the International Mission Board. He's coordinated security for more than 5,000 Southern Baptist missionaries and personnel as they serve in more than 140 countries worldwide. He has helped launch multiple ministries that help empower and protect missionaries around the world, including the Risk Management Network, an interactive network of more than 100 Christian security professionals who are globally responsible for more than 100,000 missionaries as they serve God worldwide. The question today is, how do we lead our families to share the gospel in a world that appears to be so unsafe? As you'll see in this interview, there is no one that we could speak with that knows more about safety, security, and sharing the gospel than Scott Brawner.
Scott, thanks for joining us. Tell me a little bit about what you do so parents will know kind of your background in safety and missions and all that.
Sure. So to begin, I came to know Jesus when I was 16 years old, actually through Youth for Christ Ministries in Kansas City. Began my involvement in a Southern Baptist church then at 16 years old, was raised Methodist, but was saved, and then ended up, by I think God's divine timing and great sense of humor, getting into the Southern Baptist Church, and have been there ever since. So joined the Army right out of high school, became an Army Ranger, served in 1st Ranger Battalion in Savannah, was a sniper in the Gulf War in 1991, was called to ministry while on active duty. And so I did my time and then used the GI Bill to go to college, got involved in local church ministry, doing youth ministry in local county seat Baptist churches. Ended up working in collegiate ministry for Georgia Baptist Convention in Savannah and Brunswick, Georgia. Finished my undergrad degree, went to seminary at Midwestern Seminary, and joined the association there, doing associational youth ministry, ultimately joining Missouri Baptist Convention when I graduated from seminary and served as the director of youth evangelism, running their camps and programs. While doing that would be from about 1993 up to about 2004 or 5. So during that time, I also got involved in mission sending and discipleship through some non-traditional, when I say non-traditional in Southern Baptist terms, discipleship and sending, and started a not-for-profit organization called FaithWorks, and developed that program to help students develop a passion for God and a radical commitment to kingdom growth. Over about 6 years, we began to partner with International Mission Board and sending students to 43 countries between 1998 and 2005, including, I was honored to take the first Southern Baptist student team into Afghanistan in 2003, and then to take a team into Iraq, student teams into Iraq after the invasion in fall of 2003. In fact, funny thing, I was in Baghdad the night they caught Saddam Hussein on a mission trip. I was literally in the green zone the night they caught Saddam, doing a discipleship and evangelism program, going up into Erbil in northern Iraq and then over to Mosul. And that's a whole nother story for another time. So the reason I'm saying this is, when I come to security, I'm not a 30-year security veteran who holds safety as my highest value. In fact, the opposite is true. I hold the gospel as the highest value and then make safety the highest priority. And the reason this is important is because when we hold the gospel as our highest value, we know we're never going to complete the Great Commission without risk. We cannot eliminate risk from Great Commission obedience. So once we understand that, now I can start setting my priorities based on my values. Gospel's my highest value, and as I set the priority of safety for my teams, for my students, for adults, whoever it may be, I'm doing that with the Great Commission in mind. So in 2005, I started a ministry called Fusion in partnership with, at that time it was FaithWorks, in a bilateral partnership with Midwestern Seminary and International Mission Board in 2005. That was a semester program, because really my heart at the end of the day is not trying to save the world one missionary at a time. My heart is to raise up young men and women from adolescence to biblical adulthood to walk with Jesus for a lifetime. That's what really gets my heart pumping. So in doing that, part of our process in Fusion involved a semester of international mission service abroad. So a lot of the security management I was developing had started in FaithWorks and really began to be more robust with semester mission sending versus 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks here or there. And that led to, in 2007, IMB calling me to be their director of risk management. And so in 2007, my life shifted significantly to corporate mission sending. In other words, my boss was the executive vice president of IMB at that time, Clyde Metter, and Jerry Rankin, who was the president. It was amazing, because on my right was Clyde Metter's office, on my left was Jerry Rankin's, and I was literally sandwiched in the middle, and I'm the student guy, right? And that was nearly a train wreck, because I continued doing Fusion, working with Fusion, as well as doing security management for IMB, and it was a lot of fun. And both of those guys were really just generous and merciful with the noise that I brought to their office. So
that's wonderful. Now you do Concilium. What is that? Tell us a little bit about your current company.
Yeah, so 7 years I was at IMB, dealing with everything from kidnappings to evacuations to murders and and all the terrible stuff that you don't see in a missionary pamphlet. And the Lord really made it clear by 2014 that what we had developed for a program inside IMB needed to be reproduced across the broader evangelical community, and that's what led to Concilium. And so in 2014, Concilium launched, and so now we provide a fourfold ministry. Concilium is not a company; we're a 501c3 religious organization. So we're a religious ministry, and we provide security training. We provide strategic intelligence and guidance for mission agencies. We provide crisis management and support. And then finally, we provide member care, which would be crisis debriefing. If someone's been through a critical incident, or critical incident debriefing, someone's been through a traumatic incident, we do debriefing on that. What you might call pastoral care, member care, pastoral care. So Concilium really is a fourfold ministry to ministries. And so presently, we train about 1,000 people a year through our programs. We have begun opening offices around the world. We have an office in Nairobi, Kenya. We're opening an office this year, depending on what happens with COVID, in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And we're continuing to open around the world. We now offer our training in 6 languages, English, Spanish, French, Arabic, of all things, Mandarin, Chinese, and Mongolian. And what's come out of this is the principles we started teaching missionaries have direct application to the persecuted in the church. So when you think about brothers and sisters overseas, and this, by the way, I'd clarify here, there is no church and persecuted church. There's just the church. And inside the church, you have those who are persecuted, and those who are not. So we began training our brothers and sisters internationally in the principles that we teach to American missionaries as they go abroad.
That's awesome. Tell me, during this global pandemic, you have connections all over the world. What are you seeing God do, even as the world kind of pushes the pause button on a lot of busyness?
COVID-19, and we're talking about the churches in America right now, has forced us to get out of this slothfulness, or it's putting us in a position to make a choice. For years, we have sung hymns that say, rescue the perishing, care for the dying. But have we ever really rescued the perishing or risked our lives to care for the dying? I mean, when we think about missionaries and the problems that they face, they're always over there. It's never right here. So what COVID-19 has forced us to do is to reevaluate obedience. So many people who are ill prepared for gospel service, and that's just whoever those people are. Every one of those people at one point started at an altar somewhere, usually inside of a comfortable church, and they're crying out the cry of Isaiah, "Here am I, Lord, send me." Then they get to the mission field with all of their exuberance, with all their passion, but with very little equipping, be that emotionally, spiritually, or even practically for where they're serving. And then the wheels come off of that cart in some sort of way, and the same person who earlier was crying, "Here, my Lord, send me," is now waving their hands and saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Why? Has their calling changed? Or has just the situation or the environment around them changed? Why are you letting the environment determine your calling? Has the calling of the church changed because of COVID-19?
No.
So we have to look at, that exactly. So we have to look at this as moms and dads. And just for the record, I'm the father of 3 kids. I've got a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 9-year-old, boy, girl, boy. And as I've been raising my kids, and they've traveled with me to a lot of places. I mean, it's been an amazing ride taking these kids to some amazing and sometimes dangerous places in the world. But I've had to ask this question. As a middle-class American, what's my goal for my kids? In other words, what's the rationale for them to do good in school? Okay, I want my kids to do good in school. This is the typical American, and I might even say Christian view. Study hard in school so that you can get a good scholarship to go to college. Go to the best college and get the best degree so you can get the best job. You want to get the best job so you can make the most money and have a bigger house and more cars and opportunity, whatever that means. And to get married to the very best boy or girl along the way, and to make you or me the very best grandkids. Oh, by the way, go to church. So what have we done with that? Without even thinking, we have set priorities based on values. And what we've done is to say to our children, you know what? We want you to gain the whole world, even if it costs you your soul. So what does this have to do with COVID-19 to bring it back around? This has given us a wake-up call, and to ask us the question, what's worth risking and why? If we know that old people in general, however we define old, I'll be 50 this year, I'm old, right? If old people are more susceptible to this disease than young people, what have we done to help our kids grow in their understanding and concept of risk and obedience in light of COVID-19? How many of us have sent our kids over to our neighbors' houses to check on them? How many of us have sent our children, our teenagers who can drive, 17, 18, let's say 19, 20 years old, and said, you know what, we've got senior adults in our church who have no business going out right now to buy food because they could become infected, but you have a much lower chance of becoming infected. So why don't you go and buy their food? They'll pay for it. They've got the money, but you go and risk your life. I mean, can you imagine before this event, we would always say to a military or police officer, thank you for your service. But now every day, the people who are risking their lives is that lady or guy at the checkout line at Walmart or at your local supermarket. They're risking their lives every day to make sure that you can buy your marshmallows. Is it any less of a question why we should be letting our children or empowering them to go out and to set their values and priorities by risking their lives to see to the needs of our people when that checker's doing it every day for $8.50 an hour? Priorities, values.
That's great.
So that's why. Go ahead.
I would say for the parent that hears that and they go, man, I really want to do that. What would you say would be the wisest thing to do that? Gloves on, mask, those kind of things. preventative. We want to serve and go into the communities and share the gospel right now and love our neighbors. How do we do that and be safe about it? We want it. You're going to send Aaron out to do it. Tell me, what would you put on him? How would you kind of instruct him and train him to do that in a way that is as healthy as you can make it, or safe as you can?
Sure. Right. See, and what you've said is critical here. Holding the gospel as our highest value, wanting to be salt and light. I send my children, my son or my daughter, out. They've already done this. They go next door. We've had in my county up here in northern Kansas City, we've got well over 60,000 people, and we've had 25 people that have been infected. Not very many. So the likelihood of sending my kid across the street without a mask on, of them getting infected with something, to a senior adult family who doesn't go out, very, very low. So no, I don't send them in a mask and gloves over to my neighbor's house. But if my neighbor says, hey, could you help us with this? Now, if they go to the store, let's say, I want them to perhaps button up, maybe gloves, maybe mask. And that's entirely appropriate, because what are we doing now? We're not saying, oh, don't go to the store, it's too dangerous. We're saying, no, the greater need is helping our neighbors and being Jesus to them. Therefore, let's use safety and security to build resilience into your ministry. That's what the gloves and masks are for. It's not necessarily to keep you from being infected. It's to make you resilient in the face of pandemic.
That's
and
good.
So
go ahead.
Well, so that's where I would begin. And then when coordination of this comes in the church, and maybe you guys have already done this, but I've talked to a couple other churches about this and some state Baptist conventions, is we need to get pastors and youth pastors united in this and to say, okay, let's split up the members of our church, or even through our deacons, because usually, when it comes to heavy lifting, we put that back on the deacons. But if you look at the average age of most deacons, it's up there into their 50s, 60s, and 70s. So these are not the guys that need to be going out and doing this right now. So it may be almost in the view of an internship, where you take these young people and you say, okay, this deacon has these families that he's responsible for. Well, let's assign 5 kids or 6 kids through this one deacon to be able to connect with these families, to see how they're doing. But by the way, and at the same time that this is going on, some of these recent polls have shown that the level of loneliness has skyrocketed. Mm-hmm. And I have a real concern that we could see as much of an epidemic of suicides coming out of this as those who've actually been infected and killed by coronavirus. So just this type of human touch, in other words, relational contact with somebody to let them know that you love them and that you care for them. And it's not just a one-off. Let me be very clear. This is not just, okay, green flag, they're good, let's move on to the next house. This is an ongoing intrinsic relationship with the most vulnerable emotionally and spiritually, who really need our help during this time.
I've been, really concerned about the mental health aspect too, and the fact so many people are isolated. In fact, I would say connection over content is the main thing for churches. We need to connect versus producing more content, although both are important. Tell me, as the thing gets lifted and we see restrictions, there's going to be people who are just running toward that and they don't care because they want to get out of the house. But there's going to be people who are the most isolated probably right now, and they're coming out, kind of putting their toe in the water. What are some things that they should think through as they're thinking about going to that concert, going to that mission trip, going to that sporting event, going back to work or whatever? What are some kind of things that they should be as they're assessing risk in this time for themselves and their families?
The Bible never said greater love has any man than this, but they lay down his life having fun at a concert.
Yeah.
Okay. Not there. So if your kids or you, if you have an immunity issue or concern, you might want to be rethinking this in the near term. If you have some sort of health issue that leaves your immune system compromised, or if you have a lung issue, you might want to rethink this in the near term. Remember, when we deal with our churches, I know you guys are multiple campuses, but in general, people who come from a church come from a specific set size area. In other words, people don't come 300 miles every day to go to church. And what we're talking about right now is dispersal patterns. If you live in an area that's had very little impact from COVID-19, then everybody coming together for church, there's not a high likelihood of somebody being infected. But the broader the reach of your church, in other words, the farther people come, let's say from one metropolitan area to another to come to church, that's where you begin to raise the likelihood of contact with someone who's had it or currently has it. So we need to take that into consideration. So if you've got those health risks that are present, you need to be careful. I would say to most churches, if you're doing church by Zoom right now, when you do reopen, continue to do the Zoom calls or Facebook or however you're doing it, to give people time to come back in who are facing a little more trepidation in their decision making due to health concerns.
And it's going to be a transition for everybody. I like what you said about concerts. It may be that this is the time that we go back to priorities and say, for 2020, it's not worth going to that event that if I get COVID, I'm going to be like, I got COVID to go see whatever concert versus, hey, I want to go do this because it's a gospel-centered thing. It's a camp and it's teaching about Jesus, or it's telling someone about the gospel. And I feel like that is a value, then I'm going to risk it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
It is. You know what? The other thing I'd say with this, if you look at the people who are dying of COVID-19 in the United States right now, and there's been a lot of argument. Well, did they die of COVID-19 or was it just complications from other issues? If anything, I want to encourage families. Now is the time to start focusing on getting healthy, because someone who is healthy does better with these types of pandemics or viruses in particular than those who are unhealthy. So when it comes to exercise, when it just comes to the way that you live, it's important to keep your health up. I look at it this way: you cannot help others if you need help yourself. And so if there are practical ways to get yourself healthy and maintain that healthy lifestyle, I think that's going to help folks as well. And maybe that's going to be a wake-up call for a lot of us, but one finger points forward, so I got three pointing back at me here. So, in reality, I don't need to be going to McDonald's and Sonic as much as I used to.
Yeah.
And so just as a little challenge, that maybe our personal health needs to come into this as we prepare for the future as well.
Yeah, because it's not a security risk. It's more of a safety concern with it being an illness. Anything beyond health, any kind of safety or thoughts that parents need to be thinking about that maybe is off their radar that we need to be considering as it comes beyond just we need to be healthy, which hopefully, during this time, a lot of them are making some changes.
Yeah. Homeland Security on April 8th last week put out a report for all houses of worship that there's been a rise in chatter both on the left wing and the right wing of attacks on churches. There's been anger from the far left for churches that have continued to meet during this time, and they need to be stopped or blown up or whatever. But that's the fringe, and most evangelical churches in particular have remained closed during this time and found alternative worship methods, through remote or distance applications. So when you reopen, church security teams do need to be aware. Now, we were talking earlier, there's still a higher likelihood when it comes to attacks, right? We talk about attacks on churches. We get so worried about the active shooter that we forget there's a higher likelihood of someone trying to walk up with a child out of the children's ministry than somebody shooting up the sanctuary. And on top of that, there's still a higher likelihood of you being hit by a car in the parking lot than there is of someone trying to steal a kid out of your church. So when we look at likelihood versus impact, we always focus on an active shooter because that has a huge impact. But the actual likelihood of other events taking place is real. And so in our crisis management, excuse me, it's a COVID cough.
Good to know. Yeah, good to know. Keep that in Kansas.
Yeah. Well, what that does is it forces us to reevaluate the threat and risk matrix, because we don't want to be so focused or myopic on active shooter that we miss everything else that's going on around us. So the key to safety in anything is good situational awareness, paying attention to what's going on and knowing how to apply the information that you're receiving, what you see. In other words, that's like the saying, see something, see something, say something. Well, sometimes we need to see something and do something. So don't be afraid to make a decision and act. Don't be afraid to say, you know what, this just doesn't look right. We need to change something in our actions or behavior in order to keep ourselves safe. So I teach that to everybody.
We at our church that's a continuing conversation about keeping kids safe, and we certainly do everything we can to keep security. That's a high focus on us, and as well as having security in the lobby, having some focus. We kind of constantly evaluate that, and we'll be on high alert, like you said, because I think it's DOD that produced it on April the 8th, or Homeland Security produced it on April the 8th. What are some things? Yeah, as a parent that's heard this, and I'm wanting to start family discipleship, I want to pour into my kid. I want them to be that type of kid that's going to grow up to be someone that's going to take the gospel to the world. What are some things that we can start now as a dad to your kids that kind of helps mentor and disciple them? Because most of us weren't discipled or mentored ourselves to be like that. So what are some practical advice that you have?
Well, I'd say to every dad out here, you need to lead by example. That is the first and foremost word that I can give. Look, somehow back in the 1980s, when the youth pastor became sort of premier, the word went out to our church members: we're professionals. Don't try this at home. And the next thing you know, parents acquiesced, and they turned over the religious education and discipleship of their children to that young professional in the youth pastor. So that's not even biblical. So I'm not saying fire your youth pastor, but what I am saying is your youth pastor needs to be the one who empowers what you're already doing at home and reinforces what you're already doing at home, so that youth camp doesn't become the one place a year where they're getting some sort of spiritual guidance and insight, but that camp actually becomes a capstone experience to what's already going on in the home. So that would be number one. Dads, you need to lead by example on this. But then secondly is I think from that spiritual obedience perspective, we need to repent. We and I've had to do this with my own family. 'Cause look, truth in advertising here, I travel 250 to 280 days a year. I mean, I am the deadbeat of deadbeat dads. So I have to maximize the time that I have when I am home. And I haven't done a good job of that. And I've been convicted over that. And I had to apologize to my wife and kids over it and ask their forgiveness. So the reason I say that is that we've all made mistakes as men, and sometimes we don't want to address them, because those mistakes, because it hurts. But maybe right now it's not that looking strong and tough that's important, but maybe showing a little bit of that weakness and saying, I'm not perfect, and you guys know I'm not perfect, and I want to admit that I'm not perfect, but where I am weak, Christ is strong, and I'm willing to repent so that I can start over and do better. And again, that helps to lead by example. So for a lot of us who are home now, by the way, this is the longest I've been home in over 8 years. I was sitting in Hong Kong on January 20th, when this January 14th, when this whole thing began to blow up. I was over in China, or in Hong Kong, training Chinese believers how to deal with persecution, dealing with surveillance, and dealing with interrogation. I mean, can you imagine having to teach it? Okay, let's do a class today in church, folks, on how to deal with interrogation. I mean, it's insane, but that's what they face as this whole COVID-19 was picking up. And I'm in the back of my head saying, is it worth me taking this risk right now? And continuing to always process, is this where I need to be right now? Because I'm leaving my family at home. And so ultimately by the 20th, 21st, 22nd, it started to be clear that we needed to do something else. And so fortunately the trip finished up and I headed home, and we began to reevaluate by February where I needed to be.
Yeah.
And yeah. So anyway, all that to say, I don't want to be sitting here just wagging my finger at people. I just want you to know this impacts me as well and how I've lived, even as a professional ministry guy.
Yeah, I think that's good for dads. It begins with repentance and humility and self-awareness of, man, my schedule's been crazy and now I'm home a little bit more. So what would you say to the guy that they're to that point? They're thinking, I want to apologize. I want to do right. What would it look like to do that? What kind of, as a leader, how do you clarify the win as a dad to be a disciple to their kids, a discipler to their kids? Help me kind of clarify that for them, because I don't really know necessarily when to start, or are they doing the right thing? Is this how it's supposed to look? Because again, they weren't discipled, but they're getting convicted. They're ready to say, hey, let's do this to their wife. What would that look like? What would be kind of winning in that area?
Boy, there's a book you could write.
There you go. That probably has been written. I know, and I've got the time to write it right now.
For guys in general, for men in general, we want to see something tangible. Okay, how do I know that I'm making progress? We all have schedules that, if we work a job, we get up at a certain time, we take a shower. Some of us, we work out, or we have our quiet time or whatever. What I would do is just to start documenting this, saying, okay, how do I pray with my kids? When do I do that? Is it just at the dinner table at night, and it's the blessing on the food and bless the missionaries and eat, or have we set up a time? Even, it doesn't have to be hours, even 15 minutes. Just to come together and either go into the word or to say, hey, tell me, how are you doing? And pray by name for your kids. Another thing, there's a new show out called The Chosen. Have you been watching The Chosen?
I haven't. I've heard of it, but I haven't watched it yet.
So I just started this with my family last night, and it is neat. And they'll tell you up front, they're taking some liberties here, but the ultimate goal is to point people back to the gospel and back to Christ. And it is from my 9-year-old to my 16-year-old has created opportunities to just talk about what's going on, as you see Mary Magdalene as this, I don't want to give it away, but here's this person who's possessed by demons, and here comes the old religious guy who can't help. What do we do with this? And literally just stopping the show and hitting pause. I'm playing it from my iPhone up onto the TV, right? And just pause it and have a conversation, or once it's over, to have a conversation. And it's not like some of these other Christian shows where just like, oh my gosh, you're dragging along. I mean, it's a human drama, man. It's a good show. So maybe that would be a resource where we can all sit down together, turn our hearts and focus towards the Lord, and then have a discussion after that. I know for Christmas, for Easter, this last week, I had each of my kids, I told them beforehand, let's make a video for your grandparents who live up in my wife's from Michigan, and said, I want each of you to share the story of Easter through the lens of faith, hope, and love. And so I gave faith to my oldest, I gave hope to my daughter, my middle child, and love to my 9-year-old. And each of them, for about 2 minutes, we recorded it so that we could send it up to her parents to see their perspective, my kids' perspective on the Easter story. And it was neat because my older son, he writes out everything, and he reads it. My 9-year-old, he's totally unscripted. And it's talking about love, and what did love have to do with the sacrifice of Jesus, and what should we do with our love for Jesus in light of his sacrifice, and my daughter focusing on hope, and what does hope look like in light of utter destruction. In other words, when Jesus is going to the cross and he's going to die, what does hope look like when you're crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me, literally from the cross? What does that, I mean, and that's a 14-year-old girl who's doing that. So just these little opportunities along the way. So when you start looking for success and saying, has this worked? Is it good? You often are going to mark this success by time, and just a hatch mark. Yep, we did it today. Did it yesterday. We're going to do it tomorrow, and we're just setting aside time. And even, like I said, 15 minutes. And what that does, two things happen out of this. It brings your kids to the point where they're understanding and perceiving what it means to be obedient to God. But the problem is, it starts to bring conviction in your own life. Because as you do this with your kids, the Holy Spirit is going to bring up your shortcomings. And it's easier just to turn that off and to say, well, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to deal with my own problems. Or I can also focus on myself and what I'm struggling with. Because I'll guarantee you, in any church, with the number of men who might be listening to this right now, there's probably a man in this group that has an issue with pornography. And the hypocrisy that he feels, I'm supposed to sit down with my kids and talk to them about love Jesus and living holiness when I'm looking at pornography. Yes, you do. You are not to advocate responsibility of leading your children towards Christ, even though you feel like you've been disqualified from the race because of your actions. That's critical here, because more people have used that as a cop-out. Well, I can't because I have this. Well, I can't because I have that. That type of conviction that leads to self-destruction, I can't, that's the type of conviction that killed Judas. But when you look at Peter, who denied the Savior 3 times, and then when Jesus comes back and keeps asking, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? That type of conviction leads to salvation. It leads to repentance. It leads to transformation. So never, men, allow yourself to say, I can't do this because I am disqualified. No, the fact that you are a father puts you in the position of responsibility. So don't advocate that just because of your past actions or your current actions.
And that's a good one. That's a good place for us to kind of finish up at. Anything we can pray for you about or pray for the mission? We got missionaries all over the world. I know you've worked with missionaries from Samaritan's Purse and International Mission Board and different ones. What would you say are some of the biggest things we should be praying for those that are serving abroad?
One of the newest threats that these folks are facing is concerns of xenophobia. In other words, in different countries in Africa, China, it's actually been state-sponsored in China, where you're hearing that foreigners are bringing COVID-19 back into China. Missionaries who walk down the street and they're having COVID yelled at them. We've seen them surrounded by groups and not killed, but roughed up and scared, and so that pray for God to make their path straight. Pray for God to not just make their path straight, but to give them opportunities to share the gospel in the midst of this pandemic. Because what leads to xenophobia is fear of the unknown, and so often in those times of fear is when great opportunity for sharing the gospel comes. But usually you have to earn that right to be heard. So it comes through their actions of what they do for people in the midst of pandemic. Hence the idea of rescue the perishing and care for the dying. In fact, I would say Proverbs 24, 37. Is it Proverbs 37? 4. Rescue rescue those that are staggering towards death, and those going to slaughter, hold them back. And that's exactly what we need to be doing. And leave you with this thought when it comes to prayer. Prayer, and just like obedience and ministry, comes in seasons. And right now, the season for most of these missionaries is not planting churches. You can't plant churches in this season, but this is the season to serve. And as you pray for their opportunities to serve, this is what's going to build their credibility in order to plant more churches once the season passes. So as they rescue those that are staggering towards death and hold back those going to the slaughter, that's what's going to lead to opportunities to share the gospel with those whose lives were saved because of the risk and the obedience of these missionaries.
That's wonderful. We'll be praying for you guys, praying for missionaries. I did read the article, xenophobia being such a major issue, lifting them up, and as that transition, and that probably is not going to go away anytime soon, but we'll be praying for them. Thank you so much for your time today. I know this is going to help a lot of parents. It's going to help us as a church, and then help especially a lot of dads out there that are kind of wondering, how can I lead my family?
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Joey. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Have a good day, man.
Hey, you too, brother. Bye-bye.